Welcome, welcome, welcome to your next class where we'll be talking about exploring the cycles and habits that your unhelpful narrative is fueling. So, with each unhelpful narrative or story that we're telling, there is an array of actions that are mirroring that are a result, whether it's what's happening outside of ourselves or whether it is happening internally within ourselves. So, working with the mind to create the change you wish to see is just one part of the process, but you also must become actionable in your life to create new habits and break those self sabotaging cycles that you might be participating in. You must also become intentional and choose from a space of mindfulness what actions will best serve you. So, we've been working up to this point kind of internally. But now it's time to explore the ways that your unhelpful stories are manifesting in your life and become actionable. Bring some action because we live in a 3D world. We live in a physical world. This is a world of physical action. So we have to bring both aspects, both the non-physical and the physical, into any healing journey, any shadow work journey. And especially when it comes to rewiring the subconscious mind or the conscious mind, or creating new neural pathways or whatever it is we're working on. In this case, writing a new story. Um, the thing is, you simply cannot stop a bad habit because, as you know, when we release anything, we create more space. Okay. So if you aren't intentional in how you're choosing to fill that space that's created, the bad habit has a way of creeping right back in. So, we've all heard this. Like when we let go of something, we create space for calling in more things. So when we say no to things that aren't aligned for us, we create more room for yeses, things that are aligned with us. This same truth is evident in every aspect of the human and spiritual journey. And when we're talking about habits, it's no exception. So when you break one habit or you stop doing something, whether it's stop telling a story, stop smoking cigarettes, stop drinking alcohol, stop eating junk food, whatever it is, whether it's a physical habit that you're trying to stop in what you are doing with your physical body, or a more energetic habit you're trying to stop, which that would be the things that you're thinking, a habit, creating a pause in those habits of thought. Whatever it is we're releasing, we've created a lot of space. Okay. So you have to become intentional and actionable about, now that I have this space, how am I going to fill it? So a really good example of this is when I first stopped smoking cigarettes, like I've talked about, that consumed so much of my life, so much of my morning. I had my coffee and cigarettes in the morning and sat outside. Ritual, that was a habit every day. I had a cigarette after every meal that I had. Ritual, that became a habit. So once I quit smoking, I all of a sudden had all of this literal space and time to fill, right? So I had to become intentional. Instead of waking up and having my coffee and cigarette, I woke up and had my coffee and I went for a bike ride. I rode 4 miles every day while I was quitting smoking. And that became my new habit because it was healthier. It was better for me. It was serving my goals. Had I just left that space empty, willpower alone probably would not have been able to get me to where I am now, being I think it's been 8, 9 years of being smoke free, a long time. And the only reason I was able to sustain it is because I created new habits to fill that space. I didn't allow empty space to sit there so that I was having to battle with myself every morning about having that coffee and cigarette time. So that's just an example of how this works when we're talking about habits. This is why so many people feel helpless and enslaved by their self-sabotaging cycles and habits, holding a belief that it's just too difficult to stop. It's just too hard. So we just give up, right? And trust me, when I quit smoking cigarettes, I didn't do it just one day overnight. I had quit maybe 5 or 6 times before, but it wasn't until the last time I was already on my spiritual journey. I was already on my personal development journey. So I actually had some tools to work with that made that process so much easier than it had ever been before. Not easy, but easier. So it's really up to you to fill the space with activities that support your goals and desires. And at this point, you should have a lot of clarity about what those goals and desires are, how you want to feel, how you want life to look. And now you need to become actionable and bring the action behind just the idea of what you want to, what you would like. So, for example, if you stress eat to cope and you're trying to break that habit, you can't just restrict your eating because willpower alone can only support us for so long. Willpower cannot support us and sustain us in breaking habits long term. So our willpower is really activated at the beginning of something when we're so motivated and we're like, I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to eat this. I'm cutting out sugar. We make all of these goals for ourselves, and our willpower fuels that initial excitement. But in time, and this is why, if you think about it, New Year's resolutions, I want to say I read recently like 89% of them fail, some high percentage. Don't quote me on the percentage, please. But I remember it was a very high percentage of them fail. And this is because willpower is not sustainable long term. And we see that in the breakdown of our goals when we create these goals and we aren't bringing the action and the intention behind it. So willpower alone just simply is not enough. And willpower becomes weaker and weaker with time until we eventually cave, okay? But if when you notice the feeling of stress and recognize the urge to comfort eat, using that same example, and then choose to regulate the nervous system through breath work or a short walk every time that situation arises, you've replaced that bad habit with a more serving habit. So this is very similar to how we're replacing our thoughts with a more serving thought. Now we're replacing that thought with a more serving action to create, to take up the space that's being created. So unhelpful habits must be replaced by helpful habits for change to be sustainable. This is how we create sustainable change, not through willpower alone. It simply will not and does not work. And I'm sure as you're listening, I want you to pause real quick and think back to a time when you set really lofty goals for yourself. And I want you to, that maybe you ended up reverting back to old behavior. And you'll, in contemplating that time, you will notice that, sorry, excuse me, hiccup, that there was nothing that came in to replace that behavior and habit. And it made it almost impossible to stick with it. So the same is true for your self-sabotaging cycles. You cannot replace these self-sabotaging cycles without, I'm so sorry. You cannot end self-sabotaging cycles without replacing it with more healthy behaviors. So for example, with this, if you're a serial dater who finds yourself in the same same type of toxic dynamic in each relationship and you wish to break that cycle, of course, first of all, you're going to be doing all of that inner work to get to the root cause that we've been talking about. You're going to identify why you continuously attract the same type of partner. And you're going to be working with the mind and healing those wounds at the root cause, as I discussed earlier on in these classes. But you will also need to bring that into your physical world through action, as well as becoming intentional about those actions. In this example, that would look like finding a way to fill the time you would usually spend on your dates or with your partner. This might be things like taking yourself out on a solo date or using that time to do even more inner work and building a solid relationship with yourself and a loving relationship with yourself. Because usually, when using this example, when we're attracting those unhealthy partners, it's because we have a deep-seated view of ourselves that's less loving. So that might be, I need to focus on building a healthier relationship with myself so that I can effectively teach someone else how I want to be treated based on my own belief system about myself and my own belief system about the worthiness that I hold. And again, guys, these are just examples, but I really try to use a lot of metaphors and a lot of examples to help these things kind of be more digestible, because some of these concepts can be a bit heady at times, okay? So as I said, you get the point. You're replacing old cycles and old habits with new actions that support your goals and desires. So again, we're moving from I'm replacing this with a new thought to now I'm becoming actionable. I'm replacing this now with a new action, okay? Yes, exactly. So that concludes, I thought I had more on this class, but that actually concludes this short little class I have for you today. So your homework for today is I want you to grab your journal after this class, and I want you to jot down some times when you've made really lofty goals for yourself and they didn't work out. And I want you to just write, reflect, whatever that looks like, on why, with this information that I've shared with you today, willpower was not enough to sustain you. And I want you to kind of look at what new actions based on what you're trying to shift now in your life are needed for you to take. And I also have worksheets available for you on this, and I will see you in our next class.